At the Julian Way, we empower individuals with disabilities to thrive in faith communities by breaking barriers and fostering belonging. Your support helps us create accessible spaces where everyone feels valued and seen. Join us in making a difference today at www.thejulianway.org. Together, we can build communities of belonging.
Hello, and welcome to Palsies with Palsies. I am your palsy, Becca Marin Anderson.
And I'm your palsy, Justin Hancock. Hello, Becca.
Hey, Justin, how's it going?
Good. I thought you were going to jump the gun, but I managed to get everything turned on just in time.
I'm just so ready to go. I'm just so excited to be doing this episode that if the transcript started a minute late, I'm sorry, everyone who uses the transcript.
Rebekah is coming to this show with an abnormal amount of enthusiasm, which that's a lot of enthusiasm, folks, because we're never low on Palsies with Palsies enthusiasm. But yeah, I am super duper pumped about this show as well. Would you like to tell our guests, our audience, why we are so excited today?
I would love to. So today we have the absolute pleasure of getting to talk with Brian G. Murphy about his new book, Love Beyond Monogamy: How Polyamory Can Enrich Your Spirituality, Faith, and Relationships. And this is a book that I have been eagerly anticipating for months now. And so it is just such a treat to have gotten to read it and to get to talk to Brian about it. I will share a bit about Brian to introduce him. Brian G. Murphy is an activist, educator, and certified relationship coach. Brian is the co-founder of queertheology.com, a resource hub, podcast, and online community which explores how queerness and spirituality enrich one another. And also, he also founded Relation Shift, a relationship coaching practice helping LGBTQ plus and polyamorous people build thriving relationships on their own terms. He is co-author of Queer's the Word, as well as Reading the Bible Through Queer Eyes, which will be published fall 2026 by Harper One. And Brian is a sought-after speaker at colleges, churches, and conferences across the country. His work has been featured in Vice, BuzzFeed, The Huffington Post, The Advocate, Upworthy, and NBC News. So Brian Murphy, it is just so delightful that of all the things you could be doing with your time, you have chosen to come on and talk to us. Hello.
Thank you for having me. And now Palsies with Palsy. So I'm really glad to be here.
Awesome.
Yeah, we are so excited to have you. As the show has gained more traction over the years, it's becoming less dramatic, but we're always a little bit surprised when sought after guests respond with an enthusiastic yes, because we're two theology nerds, three theology and cultural activists and nerds that just like to talk into microphones occasionally. But we were particularly thrilled and excited with the speed with which you said yes, and then the book is just groundbreaking, so deftly and gently done, but done with a clarity that is also amazing. So we're really excited. Before we get into the meat of the interview, just to let our regular listeners know, there is liable to be a little bit more discussion of sex than you would find on your average Palsies with Palsies show. And although we are a profoundly and loudly sex positive operation around here. If you're
Mm-hmm.
listening with kids, use your own discretion. I'm not going to tell you how to run your life, but this might be one to be aware of if you've got smaller ears around where you listen. But that having been said, um, Brian Murphy, let's dive into a conversation around this book and around your journey to bringing it to the world.
Let's do it. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah,
So,
so I was wondering if
yeah,
we could start with, you want to give us kind of a quick and dirty summary of the book and what led you to write it?
Yeah, when I set out to write this book, I had in my mind that I was going to write a book about polyamory and spirituality. And in many ways, I did do that. And I
Mm-hmm.
named it Love Beyond Monogamy. But I think when I was originally conceiving of it, I was more focused on the beyond monogamy part. And I really thought it was going to be heavily about like polyamory. And it's certain, I mean, that's the through line, but it's really, as I was writing it and having folks respond to it, people keep coming back to it's actually about love, which obviously love's a big
Mm.
part of polyamory. And so I think at the heart of it, this book is about love and widening our definition of what love can be and looking for love in unexpected places and love in all of its forms, right? The ways in which, I don't know, some folks who grew up religious and then are no longer religious might bristle at words like God or religion or faith. And so, like, feel free to substitute in love as sort of the highest call and the highest ideal. So, in that way, it's about love. It's also about love in our interpersonal relationships, our romantic relationships, our friend relationships, even our sexual relationships. And examining the ways in which all of the different ways that we form connections can be deeply meaningful. And that's something that folks throughout the ages have called holy. And I think it's worth it for us to call our polyamorous relationships, our sex positivity, our casual connections, all of that as holy. So that's sort of an exploration of how polyamory and non-monogamy and sex and queerness are already holy, and the ways in which, if you are a person of faith or even just a person with deeply held values, how those values can be enriched by polyamorous and non-monogamous frameworks.
you
Yeah,
know,
go
you
ahead.
know, Brian, I want to like really pause on that point for a moment if I could, because I was raised in a fairly very orthodox religious setting. Uh, I would consider it very conservative in Lubbock, Texas.
Hmm.
Definitely when I was growing up. Uh, but since I've claimed adulthood and become a disability activist, there's a running joke among my ministry friends group that Justin is not a universalist, but I'm universal-ish. Because basically, if you want to party with me and you have a spiritual journey of some sort, I'm willing to go on the journey with you. And I've said for years I'm profoundly uninterested in who is winning whatever arguments, particularly around religion.
Mhm.
Uh, but I was so struck by how deliberate you were and how kind and inviting you were to say, I'm not here to prove a point or to score points for one side versus the other. And as someone who um, is monogamous, he uh, found family connections to polyamory and wants to be supportive. I just found that to be a very inviting and intriguing way of approaching this conversation.
I'm so glad to hear that because it's definitely, I think in the intro, I say it's it's for monogamous folks and for polyamorous folks, and it's for people of faith, and it's for atheists. And actually, those distinctions between poly or monogamous, atheist or religious, like maybe are a little bit blurrier than we imagine. And that's also some of the wisdom of non-monogamy that says we all sort of have many stories that we tell about ourselves, and sometimes those seem at odds. And it's okay to sort of hold the many different versions of ourselves. And there's actually some value in bringing them all together. And you don't always have to resolve it with a word or a label or an exact definition. That there's something sort of magical in that like liminal in between space. And I think that's true in romantic and sexual relationships. Like there's friends that have become family that are family, but maybe they're not family. Friends that are kind of act like partners and lovers, but you don't call them boyfriends. A person who
Hmm.
like doesn't go to church anymore, but sort of believes in something higher than themselves. Like we're all sort of this mix, and just sort of appreciate the specialness of that too. I think is an important practice.
Yeah, absolutely. That was definitely something that struck me while reading Brian, was like the way in which, you told multiple stories about your own journey in relationships and polyamory, that like depending on how you tell the narrative, it sounds like a completely different story.
Yeah.
Of, you just talked about your relationship with your partner Peter, about, that could sound like the most traditional relationship or the least traditional relationship out there.
Yeah.
So that blurring of boundaries and categories was something that, and multiplicity of perspectives was something I really appreciated. And I guess, thinking about that multiple audiences, but we're all intersecting here. Um, I guess I would love to for you to say a bit more about, what specifically can monogamous people get out of this book. Uh, what what insights here um, are kind of jumping across those very blurred boundaries. And that's, a big question, because like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
spend the
Yeah.
entire book explaining that. But
Yeah, yeah, that's love monogamy. Love the monogamy in a nutshell is all of that.
yeah.
But I mean, I think that there's two ways. I think that polyamory and non-monogamous frameworks can enrich monogamous folks' relationship lives as well as their spiritual lives. And when I talk about their relationship lives, I mean that both their romantic partner, if they're in a relationship with one person, polyamorous frameworks can help enrich that particular relationship. But I think it can also help monogamous people recognize that they already have many special people in their lives. And mononormativity says, right, that there's one person, there's your one and only, maybe they're even your other half, you're incomplete without this other person, and it's you and
Mhm.
that person against the whole world. And so there's a bit of an invitation here to say, like, what if we actually don't have to compete? What if, like, you don't actually, like, your wife and your mother like don't actually have to be in battle with each other, that there's
Mhm.
space for like in-laws and a new family and your college roommates and your best friends. And I know too many people who they got in a relationship and then they dropped off the face of the planet, right?
Mhm.
And love is big enough to hold all of that. There's something about intentionality of choice when it comes to like choosing your relationships and choosing exactly how you want to define that relationship. In my work as a relationship coach, I work a lot with folks who are non-monogamous, but I also work with folks who are monogamous, and it's more common than not that people who are in a monogamous relationship, until they actually really get into the nitty-gritty of that, monogamy means two different things to them. Sometimes it's
Mhm.
Mm.
wildly different, and sometimes it's only slightly different. But
Mhm.
in the book, I reference this sort of commitment clarity checklist, which is on my website as well, and it's sort of helping you like narrow in on sort of what like the contours of your relationship as you understand it right now, and sort of thinking through like when we talk about monogamy, like some people are like, you watched porn, that's cheating, and some people are like, I had a hookup in a steam room, that's not cheating, right? And so
Mhm.
and they both are dead serious and can't imagine it being any other way. And so it's really important that you get clear on like what exactly the confines of your relationship are. And then I apply that framework to our spiritual lives and our relationship with the divine and our relationship with our spiritual community. Like, who am I in relationship? When I talk about a higher power, like what does commitment to God mean? What's expected of me and what am I expecting of my higher power? What is expected of me by my spiritual community? What do I expect from that community? And sort of like letting intentionality and choice sort of guide all of our relationships is sort of like one aspect of that I think is like really powerful for folks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I am well, as usually happens to me when we've got a good interview subject, I have about 7 questions. I'll try to pick one.
Familiar.
I am really fascinated by the concept of choice. And you may have even referenced this in the book. I've read it twice, so it kind of at one point or another yesterday started to run a little bit together, which is not a critique of your writing. It's more a critique of how my brain works. But I remember in the as an 80s and 90s kid, the peril in the for the LGBTQ community, as much as I knew about it at the time, which was I was clueless and could probably do more harm than good, but around is queerness a choice or is queerness a lifestyle, and just how much weirdness was around that conversation. And then you come to the discussion around polyamory, and I'm very aware they're not the same discussion, but you seem to be in the book very aware that the arrival to poly for some can feel like an orientation, and for some, including I think yourself, can feel like a very deliberate, conscious, and holy choice of being your full, choosing your full self. Can you talk about choice in that regard and how that occurs for you, if that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. My sort of flippant answer is that I think monogamy is the lifestyle choice.
I love it.
And I'm interested in monogamous folks like defending their lifestyle choices and their relationship choices. And I mean, I don't really mean, and I mean, I guess I do really mean that, but I would never put like I would never like grill a monogamous person on why did you choose this. But I mean, I think we can just like look sort of objectively, right? Like whether or not your propensity towards an individual relationship or multiple relationships, like whatever that is, like we can look at human cultures, like by default, all animals are not monogamous, including human mammals, right? Like we have multiple partners over the course of most humans have multiple partners over the course of their lifetime, even in ostensibly socially monogamous relationships, either don't ask, don't tell, infidelity. There's lots of non-monogamous behavior happening. Largely, it's unethical and sort of under the cover of either patriarchy or monogamy. And so, like, for better or for worse, like people who are in monogamous relationships are actively choosing to say, like, I'm going to be with you and only you for forever, for a long time, and I'm going to choose not to act on these other attractions, to not pursue these other connections. And I think the monogamous, like a mononormative narrative around that is that that's very romantic. And so if you find romance in choosing one partner and being exclusive of that partner, like more power to you. I think that like is polyamory an orientation, and some people are monogamously oriented and some people are polyamously oriented. It's like I don't like I'm not a scientist, I can't answer that. What I know as a queer person is that like I don't necessarily experience my queerness as a choice, but I would choose it. And I'm like not
Mm.
interested in hinging my rights as a queer person or as a polyamorous person on an idea that I like didn't have a choice in the matter, because that sort of like feels like it comes from a place of pity. Also, I know as someone who's bisexual, but like I don't know. When I was younger, like the majority of my attractions were towards men. The most intense ones were towards men. And so when I thought that I was gay and that I had all this like Christian shame and you can't be gay, I sort of hung my "it's okay to be gay" hat on. I didn't choose this and I can't change it. So like therefore it must be okay, because like why would God make it a sin if it was
Yeah.
okay? And every time I had like a crush on a girl or like an inkling of that, it created this like catastrophic crisis for me, because I was like, oh,
Mm.
well, maybe I am choosing this, or I could choose this, or I could at least choose to pursue that relationship and not these other relationships. And so like maybe being gay is a choice, and maybe being gay is a choice, maybe it is a sin. And if it's a sin, what does that say about me? What does it say about all of my queer friends? And so like that sort of like, is it a choice or not a choice, or like who would choose to be gay? I don't know. Like I would choose to be gay. And so I think that it's like kind of an interesting question, but I think what I am more interested in, and what I do in the book Love Via Monogamy, is look at the ways in which non-monogamy is already happening. It's already holy. It's already very meaningful. And like, is it or is it not a choice? Is sort of irrelevant. And is
Mm.
it or is it okay is not a question that you answer by like turning it into a debate club exercise, but just sort of like looking at the evidence. And it's like, yeah, man, this is like it's a really beautiful thing that enriches people's lives. And so I think for people who are maybe polyamory or non-monogamy skeptical, I think we'll go into the book and see like the real richness with which we live our lives and form our relationships, and sort of recognize the beauty in that.
For
Yeah, no,
sure. Oh, go ahead, Becca. Sorry.
yes, I was gonna say, like, I think that is one of the things that I was most excited about in starting to read Love Beyond Monogamy, and that I really found there is that, like, you really go into, what are the sacred and holy things that that people can find in all kinds of expressions of relationship, including polyamory and non-monogamy. And like the way, so thinking about that choice question, it's like, well, if it's not, is if the question isn't, am I do I have to be this way, or am I choosing to be this way, if instead it's, is this a blessed and beautiful gift that I have been given, or a blessed and beautiful choice that I'm making, like, either way.
Yeah,
you
either
know
way, it's awesome.
exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would love to talk more about that sense of finding the sacred in non-monogamy, but also just in experiences that other people might call secular in general. That that this is another one of those boundaries that I think you're really blurring, is that sense of, like, what is quote unquote religious and what is not. And so you do this in your conversations about sacred texts, and talking about how the book "The Ethical Slut" by Jen Hardy and Dossie Easton is often considered a sacred text by polyamorous folks. And you also do it in the ways that you talk about experiences of the divine and of the sacred in spaces where religion might not be uh, traditionally understood to be present. And one passage that really came up for me and Justin as we were thinking about this was your story about the show tune sing along at
Mm.
Fire Island. I was wondering if you could tell our audience a bit about that story and what the sacred looked like for you in that moment and in that place.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite stories. It's funny because a few years ago I said to my partner, I was like, it's really interesting because over the past few years, I'm really starting to become like religious. And he was like, what are you talking about? You've been religious this entire time. And what I meant by that was like, oh, I'm starting to go to services like at a like
Mm.
more regularly. And I go into this more in the book, but like I converted to Judaism a few years ago, and so I was like getting more involved in sort of like traditional, like mainstream religious practices. And he was like, "You've always been religious," and it's like, "Oh yeah," but like the religious that I was before was sort of like blowjobs are blessings and drag shows are church, not like
Mhm.
go to synagogue services. And so
Mm.
I think that at the heart of my work is that if you are an LGBTQ or polyamorous or non-monogamous person and you like want to be part of the religion of your upbringing, whether that's Christianity, Judaism, or Islam, or whatever it might be, like there's absolutely space for you, and I'm here to support you in that work. And if you're like, I don't need that, that's also okay. But I do think that there's still value in looking for the sacred, like in all parts of your life. And by most definitions of the word, I'm an atheist. I don't think I would call myself that though, because I talk about God a lot. And it's sort of like and I get into the book in Love Beyond Monogamy a bit more about like what is God and how do you define God and what do you mean by God. And Judith Plasko, who is this like feminist, queer, Jewish writer, in one of her like pivotal works, Standing Again at Sinai, she says like to talk about God is to talk about what we value most. And like an example of like if we say God is just, that means both that like God acts justly and God requires justice. And so like I think it's important to talk about like Paul Tillich talks about your ultimate concern as God. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel talks about awe and wonder as part of the religious person's experience of the divine. And so like for me, God is this like thing that is bigger than ourselves. And whether you understand that to be the Christian God or the Jewish God, or just sort of like a lot of my close people in my life are a part of Alcoholics Anonymous. Like, so sometimes I'll even say like God could be a group of drunks, God. God can be the thing, the values that orient your life. Like, do you have this thing that you can tap into? Um, and
Mhm.
and orient yourself towards, and that feels like really important. And so I was on Fire Island. For those folks who don't know, Fire Island has been sort of a queer beach enclave for probably since like the 50s or 60s. And many years ago, probably at this point, 10, 15 years ago, someone who is now one of my best friends, Josh, started this annual vacation. It started with him and one of his friends, and then it became him and a few of his friends, including my partner. And in the beginning, there were no boyfriends allowed. And then eventually, boyfriends became allowed, and I got to go. And Josh's boyfriend, also started going. And a few years into this tradition, Josh was diagnosed with cancer, and then it went away, and then it came back, and it came back, and it was terminal. And I remember the summer that we like knew it was back and that it was terminal. I had gone out for a walk on the boardwalks of the island. There's no cars on Fire Island, and so like when I say boardwalks, I mean like the walking path type of boardwalks, not the
Mm.
boardwalks with rides type of boardwalks. So it's these like, two-person wide walking paths made out of wood. And I was walking on them, and I was just like, like it struck me in that moment, like how many, like thousands, tens of thousands, I don't know, like generations of queer people have been walking on these same exact boardwalks for decades. And it was like struck me that I was not the first queer person, especially queer man, to be losing a dear friend like much too soon. And I thought about all of the
Yeah.
stories of those boardwalks, the people who like lived on those, who had been on those boardwalks. And I started like tuning into the rituals and the rhythms of Fire Island. So back in, I want to say like the 60s, the Blue Whale Bar and the Marina started hosting what's now called like tea dances. It's a popular term. And so like
Mhm.
everyone from across the island sort of like pours out of their houses and goes down to the marina and has a drink. And some of the people are sober, so they're drinking mocktails, and some people are drinking alcohol, and there's music playing, and you raise our glasses, and it reminded me of taking communion or kiddush. There's music, sometimes there's drag shows. It's this sort of like, Jews pray multiple times a day, Muslims pray multiple times a day, Catholic mass happens every day. Like there's this sort of like rhythm of like we walk along these boardwalks, walking meditations, walking prayers, maybe like pilgrimages. Like there's a sense of you queer people have been coming here to hide and find each other, to heal, to grieve, to celebrate, to organize, that there's like some real rhythm and power here. And so I remember
Mm.
going into Show Tune Sunday, it's not lost on me that it's a Sunday, right? And I walk into this bar and You Will Be Found by Dear Evan Hansen is playing, and everyone is just like singing at the top of their lungs. In the original version of the book, I quoted part of the song, but it's really expensive to
Oh
quote
no.
song lyrics in books, and so my publisher made me take it out. But it's this song about feeling lost and isolated and alone, and then finding the power of community. And like, here we are, like, I don't know, 100, 150 queer people on this little sliver of land, like maybe a mile or 2 miles wide, in the sound off of Long Island. And we like found each other, and we're singing, and it's beautiful the ways in which queer people have like found family and made that family. And it struck me that like this is fucking church right here. And we're both like the church choir and the congregation. And like, I don't ever care if you go to church, but like if you're at Show Tune Sunday or a drag show, or you're just like at dinner with your polycule and you're like laughing so hard it hurts, like I want you to be able to like have a moment where you're like, man, this is sacred, and how lucky we are to have this
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm gonna need a minute to catch my breath because You Will Be Found came up. We actually sing it at church a while back, right as Dad became terminal, and it means a lot for me. So that was on it. Sorry, I didn't expect to be hitting the solar plexus like that.
Yeah. No, I think Andrew Garfield talks about like, whenever you cry, it's like all of the love that didn't get a chance to express itself. Like I'm like turning up a little bit as well. Like I remember, so when, not to get too personal, but like when Josh died, like his family of origin is like very religious. And so we had two sort of like separate celebrations of life, one with his religious family upstate and one with our queer friends and family. And me and a few of our like close chosen family went to the one with his family. And, there's a lot of talk about religious language. And I think what sat with me and what I ended up saying was like I wish that I believed in an afterlife. I don't. And so like he's gone and it fucking sucks. And the
Yeah.
miracle is that, oh my God, we were like so lucky enough to have found each other. And in uh, Carl Sagan's wife, Andrew, and she has this quote after Carl died. She talks about sort of like in the vastness of space and the immensity of time, or the immensity of space and the vastness of time, that like that they found each other. Like that is the miracle, and that they saw each other and that they loved each other. And I just feel like it's like not everyone gets to have a beautiful experience of found family. And like yeah, I love him and I miss him. And to be able to sort of continue to tell his story is a like, I don't know, it's a gift.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it strikes me that that's, the holding and carrying of all of these, deep and profound emotions
He
that
would
feels
absolutely hate it. Oh my
very,
God, he'd be so annoyed if he was still alive, but he's dead, so he doesn't he doesn't have a say anymore.
yep,
I
that's real.
If we could pivot just a little bit, I was so struck in reading the book about the ways in which you talked about even the mere act of saying the word I love, or I love you, or almost saying I love you. Um, and I'm going to draw some parallels here. So give me a minute. There's a point in there somewhere, I promise.
Awesome.
Um, I have thought for a long time that we do such violence to the word love because our getting into the binary choice dynamic again. In this culture, it's either used way too flippantly or way too much, and the other side says, don't use it at all until you meet these 3 or 4 circumstances where you maybe could use it. But you talk about the word love almost coming to your lips in so many different types of encounters. And when I read that, that drew me into this what it's like to be disabled. And for many of us, we have to uh, live on the edge of this almost sacred vulnerability to get through life, which has made me a person that loves to say I love you to many different people because, I mean, frankly, I've got good friends and great friends and found family that there's a running joke in my found family circle that you've known Justin more than 15 minutes. He must have had to wipe his ass. Because that vulnerability is there, that need for relationship is there, but that brings the word love and the concept of love so much more to the surface in my life. But tell me about what it was like for you to understand that even in the variety of encounters you were, having, one night stands, deep friendships, other types of serious relationships, other types of less than serious quote unquote less than serious relationship, how you discovered that love was something that was close to the surface, and what was that process like, if
Yeah, I
that
mean,
makes sense.
yeah, absolutely. I think that for me, finding that love is more readily accessible than maybe I'd been led to believe was definitely, it took like many years of being open and polyamorous to sort of internalize that. It's definitely some of the wisdom that I got. You know, in Love Beyond Monogamy, I talk about in many other languages, there's multiple words for love. In Greek, there's at least three. Maybe there's like seven. In Hebrew, there's two or three. Two or three. The Quran uses two different words for love in it. And even in polyamorous communities, we talk about NRE, new relationship energy, ERE, established relationship energy. We kind of realize that like love is bigger and like more complicated than just one word, and that like the I love you, I love donuts and I love my spouse of 15 years and I love my parents and I love my friends, and some of those the ways I love are different and some of the ways that I love are the same. Um, and so one of the stories that I tell in the book in Love Beyond Monogamy is I was newly dating a guy. It was my first sort of like had been on like 7 dates instead of just like 2 or 3 dates in the context of non-monogamy, right? So it was like starting to go somewhere. We were like having sleepovers. It was starting to feel squishy. I don't think we were even boyfriends yet at the time. I had another partner as well, and we'd been hanging out at the park, and we go into the subway, and he made some silly face, and like it just like tickled me, and so I said like, God, I love you, in the same way that I would say it if one of my friends had made like a silly face, right? But in the context of this guy that I was dating, the I love you hung in the air a little bit differently than if it was a friend that I had said it to, right? Like it means something different, or it's supposed to mean something different, and so I sort of stumbled over it and I was like, oh, well, like, you know, I don't, not like that, you know what I mean? And then, and then I paused and I was like, well, wait, like there are lots of different ways to love. And in some of those ways, I already do love you. And maybe I don't mean this like, I love you for forever and forever and forever. And we're going to get married tomorrow. But like, there's at least this one way, and maybe even more than one way, that I do already love you. And so like, I'm just going to say that. And he was like, yeah, I know what you mean. it's like maybe too soon for being in love, whatever that means, but like, I love you too. And then we scurried onto the subway. And so that was probably the first moment where I thought of like, oh, I could say I love you, and it doesn't have to be this like declaration that is reserved only for people you're going to marry or for your family of origin, right?
Hmm.
And it can, and so I think there's a responsibility that comes with that to be honest about the type of love that you mean, right? Like when I say I love you to him, it means something different than I love you to my sister, right? And so then years later, I was hooking up with this guy that I met at like 2 a.m. I was up late on Sniffies, and he came over, and I don't even know if I knew his name at this point, and we're like hooking up, and we're having sex, and I just felt in my chest welling up like I wanted to say I love you. I mean, it was so hot. We were so connected. I was so into him. Like we were really vibing. And it just like I just felt this well in me. And then I was like, oh, you can't. That's ridiculous. You cannot say
Hmm.
I love you to this stranger you just met. So I held it in and I was like, well, that was weird. And then like years later, as I was writing the book, I included that anecdote in the book, and then I had not yet like finished editing it, and I had another hookup with someone off of Sniffies in a totally different city, and he said it. He was like, "I love you." He's like, "I love you, Brian. Like, this is so amazing. Like, you're so great. I love you." And I was like, "Whoa!" He said the thing, but I was like, he can't possibly like mean it like boyfriend, I love you. We've only ever hooked up twice. And so I just sort of asked him about it. And I was like, oh, I almost said I love you to someone off of Sniffies once. Like, what's going on there? And he was like, yeah, I don't like, it's like, if anything, like that's like my kink is like imagining a life together. Like, I don't know, there's like
Aw.
what we're doing is like really beautiful and like special. And so this is just sort of like a container for that to live in. It doesn't have to live for forever, but like I can maybe just love you for the next 30 minutes, and like how does that change things? So then like that
Wow.
in a very meta way, like that made it into the book as well. And yeah, and so just sort of like thinking about like that I don't, and this is gonna sound mean to straight people, but like I have shown more care and consideration and had more care and consideration shown to me by one night stands whose names I don't know than it seems a lot of straight men give to their wives of decades, right? And so
Yep. Yep.
I think like like there's something really beautiful about saying like this moment, even though it was like a hookup, it was off of Sniffies. I don't even know your name, or like maybe we're having a kinky hookup, or we're just friends with benefits. Like there's something beautiful there too. I was hooking up with a guy. We only ever had kinky sex, and like, but it had been going on for a year or two, and I was like, oh, I love him too. Like we're not dating. We have only like minimal obligations to each other outside of the bedroom, but like I'm there's like something deep and beautiful about this relationship, and we care for one another. And like it's okay to call that love as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I love all of that so much. Like that's definitely something that's come up in my polyamorous relationships is that like, when do you say I love you moment, and like, the relationships that are, blurring those boundaries, and like,
Hmm.
what kind of relationship is this? Who even knows? Like, and so if I said I love you right now, what would that mean? Like, I feel like our society is kind of, instead of having different words for love, we have different contexts for love.
Yep. Hmm.
So like if you say I love you to a friend, you know what that means. If you
Hmm.
say I love you to a partner, you know what that means. But if those categories aren't distinct, we don't know what it means anymore unless we explain.
Yeah. And one of the invitations of the book, and this is to get back to your earlier question about like how like what good is this book for monogamous folks, is an invitation to sort of define those terms for yourself. And maybe you do want to say
Oh,
I love you to a friend, but in a way that connotes like I'm gonna really take care of you for the rest of my life, right?
yeah.
When I was young and in my early days, I was at a progressive church in New York City, and we were having some talk about sex and relationships, and the pastor said something to the effect of like, in discerning who you like might want to spend the rest of your life with, like a question you can ask is like, who do I want to hold me while I die, and who do I want to hold while they die? And at the time I was dating like my now husband Peter, and I was like, oh, like Peter for sure, like he's it. And in the years since then, I'm like, I was like I was with my friend Josh like when he went out unconscious for the last time. Like it was not a theoretical question of like who am I going to hold as they die. Like I got to hold. I like left the room and gave him and his partner like some time. But I've held a friend as he died, and I have another good friend who's a chosen family, and I'm like he's single and has been single for a while and probably kind of intends to stay single for forever. And it's like we're gonna grow old together. Like I love you, not just in the way that I used to say I love you to my high school friends or my college friends or even my like in my 20s friends. Like there's a depth to that I love you that is
Yeah.
more than just a friendship. And I think like defining that is like cool too.
Yeah.
Totally. And all of these different like, blurring of boundaries and concepts of love is making me think about your discussions of hospitality in the book. That was something that I found really compelling because you point out that pretty much every major world religion has an emphasis on hospitality. That there are, in the Jewish and Christian scriptures, like a lot about welcoming the stranger, and many injunctions to take care of people when they need to be taken care of, and that's true in Islam and Hinduism and Buddhism and all these things. And you talk about one night stands as an expression of hospitality, and letting someone into your home, your world, and into a sexual connection with you. But as you're saying, like it can also be into an emotional connection with you,
Yeah.
however briefly. And then like you talk about like and that's one form of hospitality, but there's also the ways in which we take care of each other as community, the ways in
Mhm.
which we can just offer hospitality by checking in on our neighbors, and
Mhm.
showing up for our friends and our community members, and people that we don't know when they need us. And it got me thinking about the ways in which uh, modern U.S. culture, I think, has really tried to stamp all of that out. Like,
Mhm.
to say like, if you're gonna have one night stands, and we're probably gonna judge you if you do, but if you do, like, that's not hospitality, because there's not really a connection there. That's just a brief thing that you do. And community is nuclear family, and maybe a couple other a church community or something like that.
Mhm. Mhm.
And everyone else you view with suspicion, and just walk past on the street without exchanging a hello. And obviously there's different gradients
Yeah,
of
yeah,
that,
yeah.
but like, I guess, and I was thinking about it, and I was like, on the one hand, like, yeah, I want to push back against all of that so hard. Like that is, I want a much more connected world than that. And at the same time, like, I am aware of my own positionality as a disabled woman living alone. Like, there is a limit to the kinds of hospitality as regards my own home and my own personal space that feel safe, right?
Yeah.
And and so just trying to think about like, where how do we bridge that gap? How do we balance the fact that like we want to have a much more hospitable and connected world, with the fact that perhaps because we have been told so often that 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 world isn't possible, uh, sometimes it can be unsafe to do so.
Yeah, totally. And also, you know, when we're talking specifically about like, hospitality and one night stands, right? To like a man inviting another man over to his home or a woman inviting another woman over to her home like carries a different level of power imbalance and real risk,
Totally.
perceived risk than like when well, like for a woman to have a one night stand, right? So that as like there's
Hmm.
all of that swirling around. Like it's absolutely true. Yeah, I definitely was like, I'm writing a book about polyamory, but I'm going to sneak in community organizing and mutual aid into it.
Yes.
Because it like it all feels related.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people that I learned polyamory from are also community organizers and queer women and working around racial and economic justice. And so like
Hmm.
I'm like it's like I don't think that like one night stands are going to cure our loneliness crisis or create
Yeah.
whole cloth out of nothing these like beloved communities. And also what the sort of object lesson of that in the book is there are ways in which that we can practice being less afraid of the other or the stranger and
Hmm.
to start in the ways that like are already accessible to you or maybe like one step outside of your comfort zone and
Hmm.
that's the place to begin. And so like if you're someone who is already having casual sex or one night stands, like to recognize that there's a lot of trust that goes into that, right? It's an incredibly
Yeah.
trusting act to like meet someone at a bar or meet someone on an app and like go over to their house or even to like to meet up for a drink. Like you don't know how that could go, right?
Hmm.
That you're placing a lot of trust in this other person. And so like if I can do that, like maybe I can put a little bit of trust in the person I pass on the street who seems to be like camped outside of my apartment building. Maybe I can be a little bit more trusting of the new folks in our neighborhood. Maybe I can be a little bit more hospitable to the like family in my building, whatever it might be, right? And so it's
Hmm.
like one of the things that polyamory taught me, right, is love, I really believe is unlimited. It's infinite. It's abundant. My
Hmm.
time and my resources are not.
Yep.
And so there's a real interplay between those two truths. And so if you try to love all 8, 9 billion people on the planet equally, you're not really going to love anyone particularly well, right? So there is like a
Hmm.
discernment and a focusing on like I actually only can do so much. And I
Hmm.
think my invitation in Love Beyond Monogamy is to not let that be a reflexive, it's me, it's my spouse, it's my parents, it's my children, it's the people who go to my church. That's it. But to sort of say, like, how can we break out of that just a little bit and maybe like I connect my it's like me and my church and my family but also the neighbors in my building and then it's like the neighbors in my building and they're people from their church it's that and like the person my coworker or a former coworker or a friend that I met through a support group right it's
Hmm.
so there's that element of like it's just practicing being less scared of each other in a world that says we should be scared and defensive and fractured. And that can look lots of different ways. And I think
Hmm.
that polyamory has like this beautiful network of like polycules and kitchen table
Yes.
polyamory, and we're all sort of like taking care of one another. And if we like limit our communities of care to the people that we're sleeping with or that we want to sleep with, and the people that they're sleeping with, we really run the risk of reproducing systems of exclusion, ableism, fat phobia, like
Hmm.
disabilities, stuff, right? And also, I think that like even if you were sort of like the most enlightened person and you've managed to like excise all of those biases from your sex and relationship life, like there's still value in non-sexual relationships as well. And so I want us to sort of like take all the best practices of kitchen table polyamory and apply that to our communities, our friends, our former coworkers, people that we volunteer with, people that like our yoga teacher training, people in our sports league, whatever it might be. Like, can we just be a little bit more like porous and collaborative?
You,
Yes. Absolutely.
you you talk about, and we're gonna need. I'm saying this out loud into our audience. We will land the plane shortly, as for fear of this becoming a 9-hour podcast, which it absolutely could.
Yep.
You talk. I want to follow up on that sort of general point of hospitality, and I believe it's in your brief little blurb about reframing the story of Sodom and Gomorrah into a story about hospitality.
Yeah.
And forgive me if I get the details wrong, and I know my rabbi, Dr. Julia Watts Belzer, will absolutely correct me if she uses this show. But you talk about a midrash around that story. That Brian, it literally blew my brains out the back of my ears. When you talk about the coins that the people in the city used to give the stranger and then put their names on it, and every merchant would refuse to sell that stranger bread, and when he eventually, starves to death, they come and take their coins back. And like I said, that reflection on that story, I literally said, thinking about for a good 6 hours one day, because excuse me, I began thinking about it as this is the way the country views people with disabilities. And they have the ADA, so of course we pay lip service to inclusion. But don't worry, if we spend money, we can always claw that money back and take the coins once they're out in the cold, which, that's going to stick with me as a framework around disabled people and marginalized people in general. But then, as God so often does, I thought, whose coins am I taking back? And I went, damn it, don't do that. I was really comfortable on my high horse up here. But I don't know that I have a question, but other than to say the profoundness of the way you approach hospitality throughout that section of the book really culminated and changed me in reflection to that story. So thanks.
You're welcome. Yeah, I mean, I think the story of Sodom and Gomorrah so often gets used against LGBTQ people when it's really clear in both the Bible, right? The Tanakh, the Jewish Bible, in Ezekiel talks about the sin of Sodom being inhospitality and neglect of the poor. There's in the Talmud and these midrashes around the ways in which the citizens of Sodom are particularly cruel to outsiders and the poor. It's like not about queer sex at all. And there's a zingy line that is like, if the citizens of Sodom had acted more like queer and polyamorous communities who really welcome folks in, like maybe they would have been spared destruction. And I think, Justin, you have like a really good insight when you were like, I felt so seen in the ways in which the world often treats me and other disabled peoples like poorly, like the way that the people in Sodom were treating the poor and the outsiders. And then I got convicted about like, whose coins am I not taking? And I hope it's a through line in this book. It's certainly also a through line in my next book with my creative partner, Shannon T.L. Kearns, Reading the Bible Through Queer Eyes, that for marginalized folks, I think that these texts have been used as weapons against us, and there's real power in saying like, wait a second, like the Bible is on my side. Like y'all are the assholes. Like you're the sodomites. You're the sodomites. Like you're the ones who should be judged. Like I'm the victim here. Like, and that's true on like the axis of my queerness, right? I'm also cisgender. I'm white. I'm male. I'm currently abled. Like there are ways in which that I hold privilege and power. I am a citizen of the United States of America whose military like enforces like economic and militaristic dominance of the world through violence, right? Like there's all of these other ways in which like sometimes both on systemic levels and also on interpersonal levels where I am sort of like the victim in the story. And there's some times where maybe I am the sodomite in a country where there's excess food, but still people living with food insecurity, where there's more homes, empty homes than there are homeless people. Like, what is my role in all of that? Like sometimes I'm a Judas and sometimes I'm like the Jesus and sometimes I'm the Mary Magdalene. And to sort of pay attention to who you are in the story. And I think the challenge that I hope that I make in Love Beyond Monogamy is that we can take great comfort in spiritual traditions and our relational and our sexual lives can be comforted and enriched by faith and spirituality, and also to let faith and spirituality challenge you a little bit in the ways that you need to be challenged to build a more just and inclusive and loving world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, as a way of helping us off ramp into the plane landing, as we say around here, Brian, in a minute or so, I know you have this book, which is imminent, like is in the process of being born, as it were.
Will be released by the time you are hearing this, listeners. You will be able to go out and get a copy of Love Beyond Monogamy.
Yeah.
So exciting. And you, what else are you excited about, either in the literary and creative world or other creative pursuits that you can leave our audience with?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited because now it takes a lot of work to write a book, and I have another book with my creative partner coming out next year. So I've been writing a lot the past like year or two, and so I've had to scale back my coaching practice. But now that these books are done, I'm able to like take on some new relationship and sex and spiritual direction coaching, and so I'm excited. I'm sort of cooking up a community group experience focused on the intersections of sex and spirituality and exploring those divine connections and returning home to our bodies and crafting like rituals and sparking like re-sparking desire and seeing all that as sacred and smutty sort of mixed together. So I'm sort of like cooking on that and in the early stages, and excited to be working with more one-on-one relationship coaching clients as well. So that's sort of what's occupying my time right now. And I'm just like excited to get this book out into the world. Amazon is shipping it early. So like if you bought it off of Amazon, it's probably already there. And it's really just to have more of these conversations and connect with folks. I think it's been so clear to me that there are a lot of folks out there that are spiritual in some way and that are also like sex positive in some way and like maybe longing to have a connection between those two parts of themselves. And so I'm excited to be part of more of those conversations to bring our sex and our spirits closer together.
Yeah, and to be clear, like we have barely scratched the surface of the things that are in Love Beyond Monogamy. There's chapters on ritual, on commitment and vulnerability, on loss and grief. Like there's so much here that we would need a 9-hour conversation in order
totally.
to get into. So highly encourage everyone to go check it out.
Thanks.
Absolutely. And my thought was, as you were talking, as soon as that experience of the sacredness and smuttiness and being better known in our bodies comes together with a little bit more clarity, I smell a sequel, so we'll have to have you back.
Fantastic.
Always happy to have you to talk about anything you're working on, Brian.
Thank you so much for having me. This is really a pleasure.
Absolutely. And friends, remember that you can find Palsies with Palsies on our wide-ranging, sometimes nerdy, sometimes spiritual, sometimes angry, and a little bit of everything under the sun conversations anywhere. Find podcasts are found, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play, etc., etc., etc. And we, first of all, Becca and Brian, thank you guys for joining me today for what was a wildly interesting and wildly heartfelt conversation.
Yeah, thanks again for having me, Becca and Justin.
Thank you.
And friends, as we always say, go out and put some good into the world, and we will see you next time on PWP. Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.